What's going on, Collectibles family? It is another day. It is another Collectibles video. We've got a reaction today. West Coast Avengers was on with Matt Nelson, the head of CGC Comics, along with 9.9 Newstand on IG Manu, and they were kind of interviewing, having a conversation with him. We will dive into it. Stick around. All right, so for those that have missed it, over the last 30 to 40 days, I believe, last 30 days, we had somewhat of a pretty big conundrum in the comic book world. CG Comics, there was a problem with the reholder services, and these guys kind of started the snowball, and I'm talking about West Coast Avengers as well as 9.9 Newstand Manu. They figured this thing out. They kind of cracked the code that somebody was able to swap books and using the reholder service at CGC to be able to pull this off, unfortunately. And there was a lot of big books that have been affected. Now, recently, CGC kind of went through, they've done some investigative work. They've got different teams, external teams also, that they're working with, and they released a list of about 350 comic books, just as kind of a starting point. And again, there's more that have been affected or infected, as we might say. Then they will add those to the list. But I also found out through this interview, I thought this was kind of interesting, that there was also some books that were on that list that actually didn't have any issues. They wanted to look at them to make sure that everything was good to go. But I guess what I'm saying is those 350 books on the list, they're not necessarily all books that have been 100% affected. They're just ones that are questionable. Some of those they probably know to be a problem, and then there's others that are just kind of in question and they don't want to leave anything behind, so they throw them on the list. All right, so first off, I think there's probably going to be a little bit of pushback on this interview, if you will. A little bit of a powder puff interview is what some people might say. A little bit too chummy. And I will push back on that. On my other channel, Sports Card Dad, I've had interviews with Ken Golden, with Dr. Beckett, with a lot of kind of high-profile hobby people. And the truth is that I know a lot of people think you can bring these people on and you can just give them all the hard questions and they're going to come on and they're going to have an interview with you. It just doesn't work that way. I mean, sometimes they'll come on and they'll agree to, yes, we can get into certain topics, we can get into kind of certain controversial things, which is what happened here with CGC Matt Nelson. But the truth is like, look, if you're going to just bury them when they come on, they're not going to come on. And so the whole idea, and I think that these guys did a good job of, they're trying to build out a relationship to where they can have future discussions, have inroads in with the company. If you talk to a lot of community members, they will tell you that, I mean, look, a lot of the CGC processes and everything, it's done behind the scenes. I wouldn't say that there's a lot of PR. There's a lot of wizard behind the curtain stuff going on that a lot of hobbyists just don't know about. And so the idea that you would be able to get kind of their big dog to come out and talk about the scandal, but then also be able to kind of answer general questions, you want to be able to have those relationships to be able to build on them. So I can understand people that might say like, oh man, I wish you would ask this, that, or whatever, or what about this thing? But there's time constraints, and B, they just won't answer certain things. And he showed this here too. I mean, there was a lot of corporate speak in this interview to where he was not going to dive into specifics. It's still an ongoing investigation as far as the scandal thing itself goes. And so he was fairly general with a lot of his answers, and that's what you would expect from someone that runs a large company in this space, and frankly, a very important company in this space. There's a lot of people watching, paying attention, a lot of people affected, whether mentally, physically, monetarily, whatever, by what's been going on here over the last 30, 40 days. So for him to come out and shoot from the hip, that's not what he was going to do. He was going to come out, he was going to answer the things that he could answer, and he was not going to answer the things that he can't answer, and that should be expected. A few things they talked about that I thought were interesting as far as the actual case itself, which I've talked about on videos. Can we adjust the case, make it more security, high security case? Of course, there's cost to be taken into account. Will collectors pay an extra cost for a more high security case? There's a lot of factors here. A lot of people, will spout off like, oh, let's do these things, all these different things. All this stuff costs money. All this stuff takes time. And it's probably not a good idea to have kind of a swift, harsh reaction when this sort of thing happens. So I understand their position. He did say everything is on the table as far as the actual case is concerned. So they're looking into it. He did mention actually having the cert on the inside of the inner well, not just on the actual label, on the flip, but also on the inner well, to kind of match those up. That he's heard that. He said they are paying attention to forums, discussion boards, to YouTube, to IG, I assume to social media, etc. And so they've already mentioned they've got third parties that are looking at their processes. They've changed their reholdering process to where they've got senior graders that are looking back at these reholder requests. So in other words, instead of just, okay, we got a reholder request, okay, blah, 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 throw it in a new case. Now you've got multiple senior graders, he said, that are looking back, checking the book to make sure that, okay, it hasn't been tampered with as we do a reholder. So that was kind of an obvious one that they have made that change to, and he acknowledged that. He confirmed that. Overall, he said that he believes as a whole, this issue is small in nature, is what he said. Just compared to all the books they've graded over time, what they do annually and that sort of thing, they believe it's somewhat of an isolated incident from what I heard there. But he doesn't take it lightly. He takes it personally, and they did actually say that they're going to prosecute the individual or individuals that are involved. I think the idea here is you want this case to be a deterrent. So instead of sweeping it under the rug and just, okay, we'll fix everything internally and hope it doesn't happen again, they're going to prosecute. They're going to try to go and do everything that they can to the full extent of the law to make an example of this particular case as a deterrent for those that are thinking about doing it or maybe have tried to do it, so that, hey, okay, these people got in trouble for doing this. We're not going to mess around with it. I think that's a great move. There's a lot of community talk, not just in comic books, but just the collectible space as a whole, that there's scammers out there that never face any sort of consequences, and then they're back doing the same sort of scamming again. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing if there's actually some sort of consequence to this sort of thing, to where people will stop, they pause, and maybe decide not to go down that path moving forward. Additionally, if you think that you have a book that could be affected, they did put the email up there again, reportfraud@collectiblesgroup.com. Overall, again, this is a starting point. This is an opening discussion, and this is really, really good. I think the fact that CGC has somebody, a high-level person, not a low-level PR person, but they brought out Matt Nelson himself to talk about, hey, what's going on? What are they doing to change it? How are they going to fix things moving forward? I thought this was a really, really good move. And he mentioned transparency a few different times. It's something that CGC Comics as a whole has gotten flack for over the years. No transparency. We don't know what's going on, this and that and the other thing. This was a really good move on their part. And frankly, it should have been. I mean, this was a huge, huge deal. I know that he talks about it being an isolated incident, that he believes it to be an isolated incident. And we all hope that to be true. But man, it shook a lot of people that buy, sell, trade comic books. There's a lot of people, collectors, big time people that are hugely passionate in this space. And what didn't need to happen is it just gets swept under the rug and everybody acts like it's okay. Hey, we've adjusted our processes. All good, guys. Keep spending 5-6 figures on CGC comic books. So this is well done here, and it's a starting point for future discussions. All right, guys, stay healthy, stay awesome, and I will talk to you again later.